that. Martin, would you care to do the honors of introducing our special guest?
Absolutely. I am very pleased and excited to be able to do this. Today, we are going to be having Dr. Darrel Ray speak with us. He is the founder and president of Recovering from Religion. He has been a psychologist for over 30 years and is the author of 4 books, including The God Virus, How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture, and Sex and God, How Religion Distorts Sexuality. Dr. Ray has been a student of religion most of his life and holds a master's degree in religion as well as a bachelor's degree in sociology anthropology with a doctorate in psychology. So I am really excited to be a part of this talk today. This is really great. Yeah, and I'm glad we're all here for this one.
Me too. I have been looking forward to this, and I hear, Dr. Ray, that some other people got to hear this talk ahead of us, and I'm kind of jealous about that.
Well, I've upgraded it a little bit. So you guys are getting a better version, by the way. But yeah, I did give this at the Purity Culture Conference last Saturday, and we had a lot of fun with it. It was good.
That
But
was
we're
the
gonna have even more
conference.
fun here.
Oh, absolutely. We always have more fun here at RfRx. This is the place to be on Monday night.
Let's jump
Yeah,
right in here then.
please
You
do.
ready? Somebody asked me when they heard about this talk, said, "Well, what the hell? Who are you? What qualifications do you have to talk on that subject?" So my
Okay.
qualifications are I've been masturbating since I was 12 years old, and I'm 74 and I still do it. So there you go. I enjoy life. I enjoy my body, and I want other people to as well. And my second qualification was I was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy by Albert Ellis, who was actually more famous when I was going through his training for as a sex therapist. And that guy talked about masturbation all the time. So I learned it. I learned from the guru and 19 when I went through his training in 1975 and 76, a few years back, as you might well understand. So today we're going to talk about masturbation, porn, and your sex life. And to open this up, I want you to know that I want you to feel comfortable with your body and create your own pleasure. I want you to deconstruct the many harmful and frankly ridiculous ideas that religion has shoved down our pants about sex. So today is all about you. It's not about your partner. It's not about your future soulmate. It's definitely not about your youth pastor. This is your day, your body, your pleasure, your liberation. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through. I think it's astonishing how something as natural and ubiquitous and beneficial as masturbation became taboo. It's like breathing or blinking your eyes, of course, with more dopamine. So let's dive in to the dirty, sacred, misunderstood, and liberating world of self pleasure, porn, and sexual autonomy, because that's what it really is, sexual autonomy. So, who masturbates? Well, if it's a mammal, it probably masturbates. Pretty much every mammal on the planet does it. Bonobos do it, dolphins do it, bears do it, and not just in the woods. Your ancestors did it too, probably, with whatever passed for privacy in a thatched hut in the hunter-gatherer world. Why? Why do people masturbate? Because it feels good, because it promotes sexual health, because it helps you sleep, because there's nothing good on Netflix, maybe, because you're stressed, or happy or sad or just bored with everything but your genitals. Masturbation isn't just a guilty secret, it's biological maintenance. Think of it as like brushing your teeth, except with more moaning, not morning, moaning.
It can
So
be
let's
any
talk.
time of day, right?
That's true. That's true too. Right. Although some people prefer morning or evening or both. I don't care really.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the history of hand wringing, and that's pun intended here. I'm going to talk about the religious panic over masturbation, and it goes back centuries. But it really ramped up in the 19th century, late 19th century, with Dr. Harvey Kellogg. medical doctor, serial inventor, and the original anti-pleasure party pooper. He believed that bland food and genital mutilation would reduce surgical urges. So he gave us cornflakes and circumcision. And you may know this, you may already know this about Dr. Kellogg, but what you don't know is he was an equal opportunity asshole. He believed in female circumcision and male circumcision. Yes, he did. Fortunately, it didn't take off as much on the female side, but it's sure with us today. And we are largely thankful to Dr. Harvey Kellogg for the stupidity of doctors cutting boys' penises for no good reason, no medical reason. Nobody else on the planet does it, with very few exceptions. I mean, the very fact that you can go to Germany and you have a hard time finding any males that are circumcised. Go to Sweden, go to Switzerland, go to England. United States is about the only developed country that has a common practice. This is a common practice. But Kellogg was just part of a larger puritanical machine determined to convince people that touching themselves would lead to blindness, insanity, hairy palms, and eternal damnation, of course. All because apparently God hates orgasms unless they're under a blanket with a wedding ring and in missionary position. Modern purity culture took Kellogg's repressed torch and ran with it straight to the bedrooms of teens everywhere. Pledge rings, abstinence-only education, entire ministries were built around the concept of hands off until marriage. But spoiler alert, shame is not a reliable birth control. Religious shame has a massive double standard, has had a massive double standard. Patriarchal religions aren't just anti-sex, they're also incredibly inconsistent. While condemning masturbation as sinful, they give men the most slack. Women, they're left out of the whole narrative, entirely invisible, silent, sexless, unless in service of a husband's pleasure, of course. Female masturbation was so unimaginable that no one even bothered to write sermons condemning it because they literally didn't think it happened. But it did, and it does, and it always will. The hypocrisy is astounding. The same institutions that covered up abuse, preached submission, and obsessed over hymen somehow felt qualified to write the rules on pleasure for centuries. See, here's some of the myths that have risen up around masturbation, that it's selfish. Well, that's not true. It's self-care. Try doing that with soft candles or something like that. It makes life much more relaxed. So selfishness or self-care, you take your choice. It's selfish if your religion's self-care if you're not. It ruins sex. Actually, it improves it. Knowing your own body makes partnered sex better, not worse. And let's be clear, most of us are going to have far more self-sex than we are partnered sex. Even if we have the most enthusiastic, sexually driven partner in the world, we're still probably going to masturbate more than we actually have sex with our partner. We got more time. You're on a business trip. You're not in the same location for a day or two on end. There's all sorts of reasons why you can't have partner sex, but you can always have sex with yourself. Another myth is God's watching. And to me, I've always thought that was weird. A voyeur God, that's really creepy.
Yeah, I feel
It
like
causes
that's a God problem, not a you
yes,
problem.
the God problem. Yep, I totally agree. It causes erectile dysfunction. And that's like saying that walking causes leg problems. You know, you either use it or lose it. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. But the actual exercise of our genitalia is a good thing. They're meant to be exercised. When you use a muscle, it gets stronger. When you don't use it, it gets weaker. And there's a lot of muscles in our genitalia, by the way. Only perverts do it. So what that means is that 95% of us are perverts, as we will talk about a little bit later. But you know, porn's been around, masturbation's been around. In fact, masturbation was a part of the creation story. You may not have read this in Genesis, but in Egyptian gods, the the god of Atum Ra was the Egyptian creator god, and he brought the world into existence by masturbating. Literally, he jerked the cosmos into being. Isn't that cool? And
I
some
mean,
indigenous,
it's called the Milky Way galaxy. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
oh, that's good, Kara. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a
Thank you.
good one. I will steal that, by the way.
Feel
I'm going to
free.
put that in. Yeah, it's called the Milky Way for a reason. I love
That's
it. I
right.
love it. In some indigenous cultures, masturbation was part of rituals or preparation for battle or vision quests. The Greeks had it in all sorts of art. The Romans, I mean, look at Pompeii. Look at all the pornographic drawings on Herculaneum or Pompeii in the archaeological digs there. Of course, they had orgies, they had bathhouses. In India, they had the Kama Sutra. So compare modern purity culture with what went before, and what we see now is that you don't touch yourself, or as Gail likes to say, it'll make the baby Jesus cry. We don't want to make the baby Jesus cry. Now, there's a hero to our story, and this hero's name is Betty Dodson. I'll bet most of you have never heard of Betty Dodson, but she was in the 1980s a very sex positive feminist that kicked down the shame soaked doors of masturbation. And Betty didn't just talk about masturbation like we're doing it today. She taught group classes in her New York City apartment. She gave women mirrors to look at their genitals. She gave them vibrators to use on their clits. She guided them through orgasms. Imagine in your Bible study with a, it's like a Bible study, you know, with vibrators, if you would. Betty
That
Dodson.
sounds a lot more fun than the Bible studies I went to.
Yeah, go look up Betty Dodson. She was an amazing person, but she really thought women get the shaft on this whole self-stimulation and puritanical culture and shame. So she was bound to get over that bullshit. She died, she died about 3 or 4 years ago. I think she's like 91 years old when she died, and still preaching masturbation. Now I don't know if she still was or not. That's another question, but she was very instrumental in that. So
Now,
let's kind
is
of get
that oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I had a follow-up question. I remember learning in a feminist studies course about a book that was instrumental in, I think it was second wave feminism, which was called Our Bodies, Ourselves. And it
Yep.
came with a little mirror that was like for this purpose to like help women, look at their bodies. And I think that it was also intended to assist with pleasurable activities as well. But was this kind of what Betty Dodson was involved in as well, or was it a different?
At about the same time, Nancy Friedan wrote that book about bodies ourselves.
Okay.
I don't remember it coming with a mirror, although it wouldn't surprise me knowing Nancy Friday. And I've actually got two or three of Nancy Friday's books within almost arm's reach of me right now. Um,
Oh,
she
okay.
wrote. Nancy Friday was one of the first people to interview women about their sexual fantasies, and she learned all sorts of stuff about women's sexual. That book, the book on women's sexual fantasies, is eye-opening because until I read it, I thought men only had fantasies. Now, you know, I was still a naive 25, 26-year-old guy, but what did I know at that time? Yeah, Betty, um, Nancy Friday, and Betty Dodson were in the 80s. Earlier than that was Betty Friedan, but she didn't write on that particular subject. But she started, of course, in the she wrote the Feminine Mystique, I think, in 1962 or three.
Ah,
Well, let's look
yes.
at some statistics here. Almost everybody masturbates, just like we know in the mammalian world, mammals, large numbers, percentages of mammals masturbate. research in surveys have shown that 94.5% of women say they have masturbated. The other 5% are probably shy or in denial, or maybe they're Catholic. I don't know. 76% of women actively masturbate. 26.8% say they do it 2 to 3 times a week, and that's just about right. 92% admit to masturbating, which means the remaining 8% either don't have hands or they're afraid of hell. One of the two, who knows? Yeah.
We're noticing some comments in the chat from people who thought that was an interesting difference in the statistics, that they would have expected that the percentage would be higher for men than women. So it makes one wonder if people are not reporting accurately, perhaps.
Well, there's actually been quite a few different surveys, and the statistics can vary. I would say they vary as much as 10%. So I wouldn't, I would just say that it's pretty clear that they're in the 90s, whether it's 95 or 92, 98. I don't know. My mentor, Dr. Albert Ellis, was fond of saying that 95% of men will admit to masturbation, and the other 5% are lying. So you can take it however you want there. So self-pleasure is not a gendered activity. It's human activity. And we've been shamed out of exploring our bodies. It's actually a cultural tragedy. Think of the millions of people who went without this pleasure because they were afraid, because of a cultural belief structure, in this case Christian, but it also could be Hindu, it can be Jewish, it can be Muslim, it doesn't matter. All the patriarchal religions are interested in controlling our sexuality, especially women's sexuality. So why is masturbation good for you? Well, I've got all sorts of reasons why it's good for you. It helps us with endorphins. It gives us oxytocin and dopamine. It's a sleep aid. The evidence shows it actually boosts our immune system. It increases estrogen and collagen for women, prostate cancer prevention for men. I'm all into that. If you masturbate at least 21 times or have sex at least 21 times a month, you're gonna prevent prostate cancer. So I practice regular prostate cancer prevention. And I forgot, I've got all this statistics that I showed you here. I didn't trust any of them, Kara. So I made my own survey, and here's what I found.
And so how did we arrive at these? Oh, for people who are listening, do you want to describe the results that you found in your very scientific study?
Yeah, it's a joke meme, of course. It's got why do you masturbate? And for women, they've got about 50% because I don't want to go to sleep yet, and looks like about 80% says because I'm alone, and about 20% says because I'm excited. Now, on the men's side, it says, why do you masturbate? And it says, I was just scratching my balls, and oh well. And that's too true, by the way. I don't know. This is a meme I found. I thought it was hilarious. But we'll move on. Don't trust my science. I'm pretty bad at that. So anyway, so I want to throw out a timeline, if you will. I want you to think about masturbation in the life cycle over a long period of time in your life. And I know you can't, if you're listening, you can't see this, but for those of you who are watching, I want you to look at the gray line first. And this is a graph that shows how much masturbation you're probably going to engage in over your lifetime. And as you can see, the gray line slowly but surely goes down until you die. You obviously stop masturbating about then. Most people do. And then you look at the blue line, and the blue line goes up and down, but it goes up and down more in tune with whether you have a partner, a sexual partner. So if you like, in the graph, it shows that if you're an adolescent, you're masturbating all the time, but you're not, you have no sexual partner. So the blue line is at 0, whereas the gray line is way up at 90% or whatever. And the gray line is actually your sex drive. At any given time in your life, the amount that you want to masturbate is being driven by the level of your sex drive at that point in your time. Now, I'm not saying your sex drive and your masturbatory urges are identical, but they they go along the same path, if you will. As a young adult, you can see you're masturbating a lot, but you probably don't have a regular partner. You may have lost your virginity or something, but you're not regularly engaged in a sexual relationship. And then when you get married or an early long-term committed relationship, your masturbation will go down while your partnered sex goes up. And that's perfectly normal. But what you'll notice is you don't stop masturbating. Just because you have partnered sex doesn't mean you also don't want to partner with yourself frequently. And then let's say you go through a divorce. What I noticed as a psychologist, clinically speaking, is when people go through massive breakups like a divorce or, you know, a long-term breakup in a relationship, their masturbatory behavior really skyrockets. And why? Largely because it's self-soothing. Your brain is missing the person that was there. Your brain misses the person who supported you, who you could talk to at the end of the day, you could have sex with, as often as you were having it. So that pushes your sex drive back up. It probably also pushes you in some ways to find a new partner. You've got a high level of rebound effect, if you will. And then you can look at if you get back into a stable relationship and in middle age, your masturbatory behavior goes back down while your partner behavior goes up. And same thing for being over 50, you'll notice your partnered sex may stay pretty stable, but your masturbatory sex is probably going down until, around 70 or 80, your sex drive starts really, really dropping off. Now, thankfully, the flying spaghetti monster invented a blue pill that has changed that calculation pretty significantly. So if you don't know what I'm talking about Viagra and Cialis. Every other commercial on the TV tells you about it. But I'm telling you, it has changed the profile of sexual behavior, especially in men, of course, but it changed it in women too. Women can be sexual way into their 70s and 80s, but if they have no male partner or the male partner is not capable of getting an erection, it can be a problem or disappointing. This is true for LGBTQ couples as well. It matters not. The fact is, medicine, the miracle of medicine, has extended our sex lives in many ways. So let's talk about partnered sex. Partnered sex. Some people worry about the masturbation. Part of the reason I'm doing this talk tonight is because I see so many people getting all hot and bothered about masturbation and porn and how it's going to mess up their sex lives, and which is all a bunch of bullshit. And the fact is, we're sexual creatures, whether we're doing it with ourselves or somebody else, and that's okay. And I want people to normalize this. I want people to feel good about it, and then realize that there's ways to make sure that there's a balance. I'll talk about balance as we get in here. So partnered sex is obviously when you're having with somebody else, but you want to balance the partnered sex with the solo sex. If you're masturbating a lot to the exclusion of your partnered sex, it could interfere with your relationship. And some people worry that masturbation in a relationship means that you're dissatisfied with your partner. And that is absolutely not true. If your partner eats lunch without you, does it mean they hate your cooking? It means they were hungry. They don't have to eat with you all the time. The key is balance. When masturbation becomes a replacement instead of a supplement, it's time to talk. When it's healthy, when it's a healthy part of your sexual toolkit, that's great. But if it's not, if you find yourself in some way pulling away from your partner and masturbating more, then it's probably time to talk about this. Be open about it. Try to understand what's going on. Oh, also, you might want to try mutual masturbation instead of doing it alone. That's a lot of fun, or can be a lot of fun. Some people really enjoy that. In fact, that's some people's fetishes. That's great. So let's talk about porn specifically. It's the internet's most popular use, second only to cat videos. At least that's what I think. Porn is not new, and it's not evil. It's fantasy. And fantasy always has been around as a part of sex forever. Take a look at this. These are 1,000-year-old frescoes on the side of a Hindu temple. That looks a lot like what I seen on Pornhub.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask you this. Do people come up with all kinds of creative explanations for what this is that is not erotic art?
Yeah, right.
I feel like we know what this is.
Yeah. Well, if you don't, go sign on to a porn site. They'll teach you real quick. So there's all sorts of pornography. I mean, look at this. This is a 2000 BCE. That's 4,000 years ago. Doggy style sex in Mesopotamia. And then the Venus of Willendorf is estimated to be around 30,000 years old. That's a lot. And is there any doubt that those are pornographic? Those are sexually stimulated. You can bet some people believe that was for sure. We've always had it around. Granted, though, porn has gotten a lot better since I was a kid, masturbating to Playboy. The Playboy I found in my dad's dresser drawer in his bedroom. Yeah, I did. I snuck in my dad's bedroom and found his Playboys and masturbated to those. And by the way, just so y'all know, I was in Playboy. I was in Playboy magazine, this very edition, the September 2011 edition. I did have my clothes on though. You didn't know that, did you, Kara?
I did not know this.
Yeah.
I am so excited to hear the story about how you ended up in a Playboy magazine, and it looks like 2011.
September 2011. You can go in there and look at it. You got to go clear to the back where they have these little blurbs around, stuff. And they had found my research on sex and secularism somehow. I don't know how they got the research, but they loved it. They liked it. They called me up and says, we want to write a little blurb in the magazine about your research. So of course I said, yes, of course you can. And then when the magazine came out 2 or 3 months later, it was like 3 inches long. It didn't even mention my name, but it did mention my research. So if you go in and you find it, look at the sex research and you'll realize, yeah, that was my research.
Well, your research may only be 3 inches long, but that doesn't say anything about anything else.
You caught the, yeah, okay. I won't say anything more.
See what you did there.
Okay, so here's the key about pornography. Don't confuse porn with reality. Porn stars are professionals. They stretch. They stretch before they get started. They've got lighting crews, they got camera angles, silicone is everywhere. If you want real sex, you need real communication. And a shirtless pizza delivery boy showing up 33 minutes after you call is not reality, at least not where I live. I've never seen him get here more than less than half an hour. So when porn becomes a problem, it gets tricky because porn is not inherently bad. But like anything, chocolate or tequila or TikTok or Facebook, too much can interfere with life. I've had so many people want to argue with me about porn addiction. And I let them go on for about 3 minutes. And I say, how much time do you spend on Facebook? How much time do you spend on TikTok? And could you be addicted to the internet? And of course, they're spending as much or more time doing that than they are on porn sites. So I think our brains are programmed by our technology. And that's why so many algorithms, for example, in the apps that we use for dating and all, are based on what is used in casinos. Casinos know the way to keep you engaged. It's it's the way our technology is being used against us, so to speak. So I think we need to look more broadly. I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. So when porn becomes a problem, it's when it replaces intimacy. It distracts us from our relationships, and we want to pay attention to that. It's becoming mindful. It's becoming conscious of what we're doing in our life. We only have one life to live. We want to live that life in the best way we can, and we're oftentimes much happier when we share it with somebody else. And most of us, not everybody, but most of us like to share our lives with another human being, or human beings, can be multiple. So there was this great porn addiction panic, and it's been going on now since a guy named Patrick Carnes wrote the book on porn addiction back in 1983. I got it and read it and immediately knew it was total bullshit. But he's made a fortune out of it. He's a PhD psychologist that should know better. I've actually got an entire talk. You can look it up, called The Myth of Porn Addiction. Just my name and that, and it'll come up. So it's not because porn is evil, but because you deserve better in your life. You want to try and create a balance between self-pleasure and other involvement or other pleasure. This is the article I would encourage you to go look at. It was in Psychology Today by Dr. David Ley. It's a good article. But he's also written a book. He wrote a book several years back called The Myth of Sex Addiction, which is equally good. So I'm giving you some extra reading material. I'll give you even more at the end of my talk here today. So go look up Dr. David Ley. He's written some incredible stuff on sex and porn, and he's written a really good book on women's sexuality. Very interesting survey research that I think many people would find interesting.
Okay.
There are so many ministers out there who haven't got a clue about sexuality, and they themselves are pretty clueless about their own sexuality. And Mark Driscoll, several years ago, he gave a sermon. Several of you I noticed were commenting on some of his sermon stuff. The guy's a nutcase, but he's a major megachurch pastor. And he said this. I'm going to read this for those who can't see it. He said, masturbation can be a form of homosexuality because it is a sexual act that does not involve a woman. If a man were to masturbate while engaged in other forms of sexual intimacy with his wife, then he would not be doing it in a homosexual way. However, any man who does so without his wife in the room is bordering on homosexual activity, particularly if he's watching himself in the mirror and being turned on by his own male body. What the fuck? Do you
I have
think this guy's
so
gay?
many questions about this.
This is so messed up. But the minute I read that, I thought, okay, this guy's gay. And I don't care if he is or not, but wow. I never thought about looking in the mirror and masturbating, but anyway, I guess it turns him on, or he wouldn't even know about it probably.
It sounds like he's real proud of himself also.
Oh, he's Macho Man. He's the original Macho Man.
Oh yeah, he's the best.
Well, let's look at the poll real briefly.
Yes.
Why don't you read them off to us?
Okay. So the first question that we asked was, were you taught shame about masturbation? And 82% of people who responded to the poll said yes. Only 13% said no, and 5% were not sure. So that's a pretty high amount.
Yeah.
And I can go ahead and read off the other responses too.
Yeah,
okay. Okay, the next question was, were you taught about purity culture? And again, 80% of people said yes. Wow, that's a big amount. 15% said no, 5% not sure. We then asked, did your church say that looking at porn would make you a porn or sex addict? And 35% of people said yes. 20% said no. 27% said, well, not exactly, but it was implied.
Yeah.
And 18% were not sure or not applicable for this question. And then we asked, if you have ever been diagnosed with a sex or porn addiction, who diagnosed you? And to start out with, 80% of people said this was not applicable to them. So the other 20% of people are responding here. And of those, wow, the highest amount, 9% of the people who said that they had been diagnosed with this said they were diagnosed by themselves. They themselves thought of it. The next highest was 6% said it was by a mental health professional, and 2% said it was by a spouse, 2% by a minister or priest, and 2% by someone else. That's interesting. And then our final question was, when is the last time you masturbated? 15% said today, yay, happy Monday, best day of the week. And 36% said it was within the last 3 days, 17% within the last week, 11% within the last month, 2% within the last year, 4% more than a year ago, and 15% declined to answer. But it looks like by far we had within the last 3 days was the most popular answer. And then today and within the last week we're about neck and neck for the next most popular. So pretty recently.
So within the last week, it's something like 50% or more.
Yeah, a little more than that. 60% ish.
Yeah,
upwards of 60%.
Great, good.
Yeah.
Well,
so
thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the questions, and thank you everyone for your responses for our research. Now, of course, as always, these are not scientific polls by any means. It's just self-reporting by those of us who decided to come to this episode, but pretty interesting results.
Yeah.
Were any of those surprising to you, Dr. Ray?
Actually, no. I'm encouraged that people were that open and honest with the survey, but no, that's about right. It would be interesting to see the breakdown between male and female, but that's okay. I think that the surprise, going clear back to Betty Dodson, is that women really aren't that far behind men in their amount of masturbation. So that was just something that wasn't even looked at, because women, nobody thought to ask the question, I guess you could say, back in the early days of sex research. Oh, by the way, just as an aside, Kara, for the audience here, do you know what the definition of a sex addict or a pervert is?
Well, I'm thinking of two possible answers. The one that immediately springs to mind would be like, to the extent that it's, causing a problem in your life, it may be an issue. But the next answer that I'm guessing may be the case is that it is not clinically defined.
No, you're taking it much too seriously here.
Oh, okay.
A sex addict or a pervert is anyone that likes sex or more sex than you do.
Oh, well, yes, obviously that, of course.
Anyone that's getting more sex than you or wants it more than you do is obviously a pervert or a
those people have a problem. Clearly.
Yeah, they do. That's true. Okay, bad joke, right?
It's a good joke. I think I saw that earlier in the chat, actually.
Okay. Oh, somebody else knew the joke.
That did not prime me to get the answer correct to your question.
That's good. Somebody else has got as bad a jokes as I do. That's good. I want to also encourage you can Google this one pretty easily. Just Google "you're addicted to what," and Dr. Marty and comma Dr. Marty Klein. You'll come right up. It's a great article. He wrote it clear back in 2012, but it's just as relevant today. Really asking, how can you even be addicted to your own body? I mean, that was basically what he's saying, among other things. So it's well worth a read, because even if you are not impacted by this religious bullshit, your friends are, your family is, other people you know are. And I think it's good to get this information into people's hands. Say, this is a very short article. It will blow away anything you ever thought about the notion of sex addiction because it is not a clinical diagnosis. There's never been an ability. Psychologists have not been able to come up with a good diagnostic criteria for it. It's not in the ICD. It's not in the DSM-5. It's just you can't diagnose someone unless you've got scientifically validated criteria, and we don't have that, and probably never will because it's a pretty bad, pretty difficult thing to understand, and to throw the label of addiction on something is really just another way for religion to get control of you. And Josh Grubbs, a clinical researcher, he was at Case Western University, he is now at Bowling Green, but he had some groundbreaking research back in the late 2000s. I believe it was for his doctoral dissertation, but he's researched it a lot since then. And basically, what he found was people who label themselves as porn addicts or sex addicts are the most religious people. The less religious you are, the less likely you are to self-diagnose or be other people telling you you are. So moral disapproval and perceived addiction to the internet pornography was done in a longitudinal examination over several years. And he found that your religiosity is the most important factor in your self-diagnosis or your mother-in-law's diagnosis or whoever it was. If a mental health professional should ever diagnose you as a sex addict, report them to the ethical authorities because they have no right to be diagnosing you with something that has no clinical diagnosis. So let's talk about, whoa, I lost my, okay. Let's talk about our energy, sexual energy. We are animals. I can go pretty strong all day, but sooner or later I got to lay down and go to sleep, or I got to lay down and take a nap. Well, your sexual energy is the same way. We're not Energizer bunnies. We got to recharge our batteries occasionally. So when we look at our sexual energy and we look at it as a budget, if I go out and I spend all my money on a super expensive fancy car, I might not have the money to buy food next week. And so we all understand the notion of economic budget, but I think we also should consider this in energy budget. How much sexual energy do I have? Many people, I'm sorry, people have a wide variety of sexual energies. I mean, think about it. A 16-year-old girl, a 16-year-old boy, wow, off the charts sexual energy. What are those same two people doing when they're 45 or 50 years old? Nowhere near as much sexual energy. Even if they're still highly sexual, the energy level has gone down, which is normal. That's the way humans are. So look at it as a budget. At any given time, say today, right now, the 24-hour period we're in right now, how much energy do you have for sexual engagement with a partner? And how much energy do you want to devote to your own sexual gratification? If you overdo self-sexual gratification, you're not going to have the energy for your partner. And therein lies the notion that people get upset about masturbatory behaviors getting in the way of relationships. Well, it is, because in the same way that buying a super expensive car may get in the way of eating a good supper, you want to budget these things and think. You want to be conscious. You want to be mindful of your sexuality. And I'm here telling you, masturbation's great. You also have to have some energy left for your partner, if you have a partner. If you don't have a partner, all bets are off. It's up to you how much energy you want to spend on it. But I want you to learn how to spend it wisely. Don't drain it all before you go out on your date. And here's part of the reason. Sex is the glue for relationships. So don't let it dry out. Schedule. By that I mean that Most relationships get started by sex. We wouldn't, as a species, be attracted to each other, even want to be involved with each other if it weren't for sex. So it's like the foundation upon which most relationships start. Well, if you don't maintain it in some way, shape, or form, then the hormones that started that relationship are going to die. You're not going to be stimulating those in each other. I'm going to come back and talk about that more in a minute. Scheduled sex. Too many people think sex should be spontaneous, but I'm here to say any sex is better than none. And scheduled sex can be great and oftentimes is better than spontaneous sex. And most of us, we're into spontaneous sex when we're 19, 20, 25 years old. That's great. But when you got a busy career going, you don't have time for each other unless you mark it on the calendar and say, Wednesday night at 7:30 till 10:30, that's our time. And we're going to watch a movie together, we're going to fuck, we're going to do whatever. That's just good budgeting of our sexual energy and budgeting of our time for each other. You can be in love and still masturbate. As I said earlier, our masturbatory behavior goes up and down, largely influenced by our age and whether we have a sexual partner or not. Next, fantasy isn't betrayal. It's creativity. We fantasize all the time. We fantasize about flying. We fantasize about winning an award. We fantasize about clocking our boss in the face when we get mad at him. It's still fantasy. Very few of us actually hit our boss. And that's kind of what we're doing when we're fantasizing with porn. And many people think that when we're having sex with a partner, fantasy is not allowed. You can't be thinking about your famous porn star or a movie star if you're having sex with me. That's not right. Your brain is your brain. Your partner has no right to tell you what you can and can't think. I'm telling you, I fantasize about all sorts of things when I'm having sex with my partner. And I'm pretty sure she's doing the same thing. And I have no problems with it. We're both enjoying each other, but we're also enjoying our own brains. And partnered sex is clearly different than solo sex. And I know some people love to share fantasies even as they're having sex with each other, and that's pretty hot too. So, last, no one owes anyone sex. But here's the key. If you want to be in a relationship, you can't ignore the fact that sex started the relationship. And sex, going clear back to my first point, sex is the glue of most relationships.
And now we say most because, as some folks are mentioning in the chat now, some
Yeah.
people may be asexual, and
Yep.
in those cases, those are the ones where it's probably not the glue that's holding the relationship
Absolutely.
together.
Yeah. Nothing I'm saying here is universal. It's probably true for 90% of the people, and it's true for LGBTQ as well as cis het straight people. It doesn't matter, and it's because it's based on our biology, not our culture. Our culture tells us one thing. Our biology tells us something very different. In fact, that's why I wrote my book, Sex and God, to show that what our culture and our religions have taught us is really, really off base compared to what our biology teaches us. So we're not just highly verbal monkeys. We're not robots. We are deeply hormonal creatures. When we engage in partnered sex, we trigger a chemical symphony that literally glues us to each other. It's not poetry, it's oxytocin that brings us together. It's dopamine. There's all sorts of hormones that are activated by interaction and touch, holding, engaging in sex, engaging in foreplay. Those all stimulate hormones. And they're hormones that do not get stimulated or don't get stimulated near as much in masturbation. And masturbation does release good hormones, don't get me wrong. But looking in somebody's eyes, feeling their body, engaging in ways verbally and non-verbally, that does things to our bodies and our brains that masturbation cannot do. And that's why it's important to be aware of both of these components of our sexuality. Women experience spikes in oxytocin when they're breastfeeding, or they're also experience those same kind of spikes when their breasts are being stimulated in sex or the clitoris is being stimulated in sex. So it's just biology's way of saying, hey, yeah, do that again. Men get a rush of vasopressin, which is a male, kind of the male side of oxytocin. A lot of people don't realize it, but men have a different hormone, vasopressin versus oxytocin. We both produce both. Don't get me wrong. Men and women both produce both, but men are more influenced by the vasopressin when they're touching, when they're engaged sexually with their partner. These bonding hormones are ancient neurological equivalent of saying, I want to keep hanging out with you, preferably in a naked way. So that's our hormones. And let's enjoy it. Let's appreciate what they're doing for us and helping us bond with another human being. These same hormones help mothers bond with their babies for thousands, even millions of years. It's evolution. Evolution has simply repurposed the bonding hormones between the mother and the baby and now use them to bond between two adults who are having sex together. It's the same hormones, but evolution repurposes those hormones. And we know this from some really interesting experiments done quite a few years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, with prairie voles. And what they found was oxytocin is the binder for the monogamous variant of prairie voles. They had prairie voles had a high level of oxytocin and vasopressin that made them want to be monogamous. If you put an oxytocin blocker in and stop the oxytocin, the prairie voles became promiscuous. They did no longer behave monogamously. We've got some pretty clear evidence that hormones are deeply involved in the pair bonding activity that we humans engage in. So sex helps us stimulate emotions, and it helps people stick together and emotionally connect with one another. So this leads me to what I'm going to call my sexual philosophy. I've already mentioned sex is a glue. Scheduled sex is good, but what I haven't talked about is something that I think is fascinating, and that is new relationship energy, NRE. A lot of our poly friends, if you're involved in the poly community, they love this term. And it's simply this. I call it the Romeo and Juliet effect. It's when two people just fall madly head and heels over in lust with each other. And you heard that right. They fall head and heel over each other in lust, not in love. It takes longer to create a love bond than it does a lust bond. That's why new relationship energy doesn't last more than 2 to 4 years. In fact, it's programmed into our biology that we will stop losing interest in each other in 2 to 4 years unless we do other things to keep that interest going. And that's the hormones. We're stimulating the hormones. The hormones go down about between 3 to 5 years because that's the length of time it takes to wean a baby so that it can pretty much walk and take care of itself. The mother doesn't have to carry the baby all the time. And there's a lot of evidence that what's going on hormonally is connected to that basically 5-year window to get a child up and running, so to speak, on his own. So last, don't worship spontaneity. Worship the glue. Bring the glue together, the hormones. There's nothing wrong with scheduling a good time for us to be together. Let's talk about shame and shoulds. Most of us were taught a lot of shame, and we were taught a lot of shoulds around sex and sexuality. And you've probably thought of these yourself. I shouldn't masturbate. I'm guessing most of those 80% that said they were taught purity culture around masturbation would agree with that. You should satisfy me. That's a should. I'm ashamed of what turns me on. You shouldn't fantasize about anyone but me. These are all crazy ideas that we were taught generally by our religion.
Well, and I
Whoa.
bet these are oftentimes very gendered in their application with the you should satisfy me. I remember learning being raised as a girl that kind of the other side of that coin was that I should satisfy him. Um, if
Mm,
you're being uh, in many cases, I think, I don't want to say in all cases, but in many cases, I think women's pleasure is almost ignored or assumed to be non-existent, or worse, assumed that women will not or do not or cannot usually enjoy sex, and therefore they need to tolerate it or give it out, or whatever the case may be.
oh
which
yeah,
uh
yeah,
which led to a whole lot of questions for me when I was like, but what if I do like it?
yeah, right, right. Well, every one of these questions could weigh one way or the other with respect to gender. I'm sure.
Certainly.
I have
Certainly,
tried
yes.
in this talk tonight. I've tried to stay gender neutral because, yeah, it may be true 20% of the time for males and 80% of the time for females, but it's still 20%. It's still 80%. It's so
Exactly.
it applies to everybody, but you'll have to decide as an
Mhm.
autonomous human being how much it applies to you.
Yeah.
And
Which
just as
is
important,
very Yeah, and that's very different than the messaging that a lot of times we get in very religious settings, which is this is the trend that we expect of someone with the gender that you have been assigned. Therefore, a hundred
mhm,
percent of you will be this way, and
yeah,
that's not really consistent with how the humans are, right?
not at all. That's for sure. So it's just take what I'm saying. Nothing I say tonight is going to apply to everybody listening 100% of the time. But I'm pretty sure a good portion of what I'm saying applies to you in some way. You
Yeah,
have to decide for yourself. Darrel's
yeah.
not here and Kara's not here. We're not here to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. We're not into shoulding. And let me move that forward because that is what I learned from my mentor, Dr. Ellis, about shoulds. Shouldhood leads to shithood. So don't should on yourself and don't should on other people. There's think about how much shoulding religion does on us. Religion is always shoulding on us. You should tithe. You should go to church. You should be married. You shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. Think of all the shoulds. We could come up with 100 or more list of shoulds. And what Dr. Ellis was famous for is pointing out things like should creates conflicts that are unnecessary. They're a cultural construct. They're a notion about how you are supposed to live your life. He also had some other things like I must. He called that masturbation, but that we're not going to go there today. He was really good at coming up with really catchy phrases to that you couldn't possibly forget. So don't should on yourself. Don't should on your partner. If you hear yourself shoulding with respect to your partner, then go get a good cognitive behavioral therapist and talk to them about it. But be careful about who you ask help from because there's a lot of bad advisors out there. The TikTok therapists are not going to help you. The astrologers are not going to teach you what you should do with your body. Go find a good secular therapist who's, and I'll guarantee all of our secular therapists in the Secular Therapy Project are sex positive, and they're not going to be pulling some of that stuff on. So here's the golden rule for what no one owes you sex, and you don't know anybody else's sex. But if you're in a relationship and you want it to thrive, intimacy is part of the deal. We aren't robots. We're messy, needy, sensual, kinky little apes. That's what we are. And be aware of that. Be happy about that. enjoy this life. Here's a fun idea. If you have if you are uptight, if you're if you feel shame, if you should on yourself, then there's some things you could do. And that is, you could go find a place where everybody is open about their sexuality. And I'm going to suggest that you go find a swinger event, for example, or go find a BDSM convention. When the first time I went to one of those was like 30 years ago, and I still had some elements of Christian bullshit, religiosity, sexuality in my brain. And seeing people expressing themselves without hesitation, doing things, somebody getting tied up and getting their butt spanked, or somebody else, doing other kinds of things that just would be horrifying to my grandmother, my religious grandmother. But I realized at that moment in time how much my brain had been programmed. It was probably the most liberating thing I've ever done in my life, was go to a BDSM convention. And since then I've gone to many, or go to a swingers event. I once went to a swingers convention, or not a convention, it was a party, swingers party, right here in Kansas City, and there were 600 people in this hotel ballroom that they had, the event sponsor had bought the whole hotel, so you couldn't get in unless you had paid a ticket, of course. And I looked at people just being who humans are, being naked, having sex, doing whatever swingers wanted to do. And that 600 people all in the same room, that blew my mind. And that's what I'm suggesting to you. It might blow your mind, but it'll blow your mind in a good way. It'll help you see how much your own sexuality is being restricted. Now, if you go to one of these events, what you'll find is there's no pressure to participate. You can keep your clothes on. You can just stand back and watch. Nobody's going to question that. There's no pressure, because that's the ethic of the BDSM world. That's the ethic of the swinger world. You don't push or pressure anybody to do anything. In fact, anybody that did that would get thrown out probably instantly once they found out. So let me address one other little issue that I think people have, and that is what's called desire discrepancy. If you're in partnered sex, one of you probably has a higher sex drive than the other. I mean, sometimes there's lots of other things. I've got a bigger appetite than you do. Well, if you think about sex as an appetite, some people have a bigger appetite than other people. And it's pretty rare for two people to be on exactly the same wavelength with respect to sex and their sexual energy, their sexual budget, if you will. So that discrepancy can cause problems. And it's not because there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong with having two different levels of sexual desire. What's wrong is when you don't talk about it, when you don't acknowledge it. The person with the higher desire level is probably going to want more sex from the partner. If they can't get it, they may end up going to porn and masturbating, which is great. That's a great way to reduce the distance in sexual desire. However, the problem comes when the person with the less desire accuses the one with the greater desire of being a porn addict or a sex addict because they masturbate. I can't tell you how many times I've had people in my office where one partner says, I don't get near enough sex in this relationship. And 5 years ago, when we first got married, we were having sex every 3 hours. And the other person say, well, you're just a sex addict because you're masturbating. I mean, it's a religious idea. And it has no room in a good, healthy adult relationship. Once you get rid of this, you can say, okay, you like sex 3 or 4 times more than I do. So masturbating satisfies that until we can have sex and we can plan it. The second thing is the person with the lower drive needs to be aware that they can't just ignore the sexual component of the relationship. And I've seen that too many times. People come into my office and say, we haven't had sex in a year, or I only get sex, we only have sex once every 6 months, and the other person's saying, I hate sex. I don't want sex anymore. Well, that's the way your whole damn relationship started. If you throw away the foundation of the relationship, you're probably throwing the relationship away in some manner. What we know is that 50% of all relationships end, marriages, I'm saying. 50% end. But of the 50% that don't end, 25% of those people have affairs, step outside the marriage. Monogamy only works for about 25% of the population. Be aware of that. I want people to have a happy life. I want people to stay engaged with each other. I want people to stay married to each other, because I think it's a wonderful thing to have a great person in your life that you rely upon and they rely upon you, and you've got a good sexual connection. If you ignore one of the most key things in the relationship, or you accuse the other person of not being interested because they're using porn or whatever, that's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to help you connect and stay connected. There's ways to negotiate when your desires are, especially if they aren't chained to religion. Religion notions really prohibit people from actually talking about what I'm talking about right now today. Most kinks and fetishes, for example, they're very strong in many of us, but we keep them in our head. There's no need. Very few of us act out the kinks, fetishes, fantasies that we have. They stay in our head most of the time. But it wouldn't hurt if my partner wanted to participate in some of my kinks or fetishes, or I participated in one of their kinks or fetishes. It's not going to hurt anybody usually. So paying attention to people, paying attention to each other is a way of showing care and love and listening to each other. It's a phenomenal thing that we humans can do. And I want us all to learn how to do that. Your partner does not have to or need to participate in whatever your kink or fetish is. I'm not pushing that notion at all. I'm just saying pay attention to each other and see if you can participate in some way that acknowledges who they are as a sexual being, and they can reciprocate in a way that does the same thing for you. Be respectful of people's kinks and fetishes. We all have them. They're probably even people who may be asexual may still have kinks. I know asexual people who attend BDSM conferences to get their butt beat, but they don't want to have sex, and they haven't had sex and not interested in sex, but they do like getting their butt beat. Whatever. That's their kink. I respect it, and we should respect each other. We've got them in our heads. Our heads are creating all sorts of fantasies all the time, and that's cool. We're fantasy creating creatures. We just shouldn't be judging each other. If I act out a fantasy that's harmful and hurtful or done without consent, that's a whole nother thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about consensual stuff. Yeah.
That was a comment that came up in the chat a little earlier when someone was saying, well, maybe I don't want to give up all of the shoulds and shouldn'ts if it means, I'm thinking about things that I shouldn't do that might harm another person. But when you were talking about, don't should on yourself and others, would you say that has more to do with like judging other people's choices? Where do you kind of draw that line between, okay, we probably should have some boundaries, right? Obviously, we should have some boundaries.
Boundaries are fine. Boundaries are perfectly fine. In fact, we have to have boundaries if we're going to be autonomous human beings. But you don't have to have shoulds. Shoulds are not a part of boundaries. I'm just saying, I like this, I don't like that. We have preferences. Nothing wrong with preferences. It has nothing to do with shoulds. I may have a preference for something you don't want to do or don't like. Fine. There's no need for should in there to guiltify or shame another person.
Okay. But kind of still, like not making a value judgment on, well, that's wrong that you feel that way, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because when you start doing those value judgments, it's almost always rooted in religious shaming, religious ideas of what is right and wrong as in sexuality.
Yeah, good distinction.
So, I think above everything, what I'm trying to communicate, I guess, a little bit is that above everything, have fun, enjoy yourself, enjoy your partner, listen to each other, and engage in mutually satisfying stuff. I'm going to come back and talk about that in a minute, give you some ideas what you can do. I mentioned going to a BDSM conference or convention or swinger conference or convention. There's actually, or go to a poly group or a poly discussion or something like that. I don't care where you go. There's lots of places that you can go that will put a crack in your religious mindset and make you open your brain up a little bit and entertain ideas that your religion would absolutely condemn. That's what we're trying to do. We're sitting here, working in an organization, or you're involved in an organization called Recovering from Religion. But I think within the framework of recovering from religion, we also need to deconstruct our sexuality. You deconstruct your religion, but I see far too many formerly religious people who never deconstructed their sexuality. They're still into guilt and shame around things like masturbation or kinks and fetishes. So I want to talk about needs and wants. I was going to say, last thing here. One thing I found really interesting early on in my work in the BDSM world was they've got incredibly comprehensive lists of sexual activities. And one of the better ones I've found, there's a lot of them out there, was kinklist.com. If you're curious about this, go to kinklist.com. And what you'll see is a description of dozens, maybe 100, 150. I think the biggest one I've seen is 160 activities. And whether you like them or don't like them, you absolutely would not do that. You've got to have that. It means the range is all over the place. And you can do it for yourself, and your partner can do it, and you can compare notes. You can look at where do our kinks overlap, where do they not overlap. But more importantly, it opens your eyes to the enormous width and breadth of human sexuality. It's a lot more than missionary position on Wednesday night. It's a lot more than that. Okay, so
wait, is missionary position specially for Wednesday nights? Is that a tradition that I missed out on?
no, I'm just being stupid.
That's great. So Wednesday night can be like the second best or third
You can do
best night
doggy.
of the
I don't.
week.
You can do doggy. You can tie somebody up. Yeah, I don't. You can get tied up. I don't care. Wednesday night's a good time because it's halfway. The week's halfway over. You might as well enjoy yourself on Wednesday night.
Fair enough.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, I can say that for 7 or 8 years, I had a lover that we met every Wednesday, and sometimes it was Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon, but every Wednesday for years, and it was very rewarding. We both enjoyed it a lot. So, yeah. So
I love
Wednesday was special for us some ways.
Oh yes, and we're seeing it's the joke was inevitable. Wednesday is hump day.
Yeah. There you go. Whoever said that, you're my kind of people.
Yep. Okay. We've gone off track again, and we got to get to questions. So
we're gonna get to questions here pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I want to understand what the difference between between wants and need. Sex is a dessert. Sex is the icing on the cake, and a want is something you have to have. If you need water, you'll die without it. If you need chocolate, you probably won't die, but you might cry about it. Sex feels like a need, but it's not. It's a powerful want. It's an appetite, as I mentioned before. And I'm not downplaying how strong it is. People will go halfway across the planet for sex. I mean, people get in airplanes and do that. People will spend lots of money to get sex. So I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it's a want, though. People can live, go to prison or go on an island where you have nobody around, and you will probably live just fine as long as you got plenty of food and shelter and
I
water.
can't
But
I can't remember who the quote is attributed to, but something like thousands of people have lived without love, but not one without water.
yeah, right. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So that's all I'm saying is I think people mix these up. They think I need sex. No, you don't need sex. You want sex, and you want it really, really badly, just like you might really want chocolate. So try to come at it from that perspective. And actually, you'll probably find you get better sex and more sex because you don't come across as desperate. People who have to have something will come across as desperate. So they don't build the relationship. They don't interact in a way that respects the other person's boundaries or, or that kind of stuff that we just talked about a little bit earlier. You also, if you feel like you have to have something, you oftentimes don't develop the social skills that you need to get what you're looking for. And sexual relationships involve social skills. And not everybody has those social skills. Not everybody matches with the social skills that you have. So you have to figure out what's right for you. And it does take some, that's why people who are 17 years old don't understand or know about sex nearly as well as somebody who's 50 years old, because we've learned, we've gained skills, we've had practice, and that's what it takes. So start practicing, and you're more likely directing the social skills, listening to other people, trying to understand what other people are saying, and expressing your own needs and wants, and you'll probably have better luck. I'm not saying you'll have perfect luck. We all strike out. Everybody strikes out when it comes to sex, sooner or later. Some people never get the sex they're looking for. That's just a fact of life. I'm not going to get $1 million either, probably. I'm not probably going to get my own private jet. There's things I can't get in my life that I would really have liked to have gotten, but I won't. And I hate that. I think everybody should have a good sex life. And I hate that that's difficult for a large number of people. Probably 10 to 20% of the population never seems to quite connect with another person over a long period of time. So there's no law that says you have to have, that you can't be a good, productive human being if you don't have a sexual relationship. I think it just enhances life if you do. So we are living in a time where we're writing the whole damn script around sexuality. I mean, think about this. Just in the last 100 years, birth control, gay marriage, non-monogamy, porn on demand. Welcome to the wild world of sex. Our ancestors did not have what we've got today. And the old rule book based upon religious principles, that needs to go out the window. We might as well burn the rule book because it's not working anymore. And that's why we see a plummeting of people getting married. The marriage rates have dropped dramatically in untold numbers that we've never seen before in the history of statistics. Divorce rates have skyrocketed. There's fewer people getting married and more people getting divorced. Something is going on. And I think it's because I'm going to give a speech at the American Humanist Convention at the end of this month on this very subject. But something is going on in our species. And sex and sexuality and sexual expression are being reinvented. And I think it's good for us to give ourselves grace and recognize that we're in a pretty tumultuous time. If you're having difficulty connecting with someone else in a sexual relationship, you're not the only one. And there's a lot of change. Just in the last 10 or 15 years, I've watched enormous changes. And that's where the biggest changes seem to have happened in the marriage rates and divorce rates. So a couple last things before I wind this up. I would suggest that as you look for a partner, I see too many people trying to find their mother or their father in their partner. Or worse yet, they're trying to find a therapist in their partner. Stop trying to marry your mother and father or therapist. That's not a good way to start a relationship or to have a relationship. because eventually you will be incredibly disappointed when your partner turns out to be not a good therapist, or your mother figure, your wife turns out to not be a very good mother figure from what you think a mother should do or a wife should do. I think once we become adults, we need to understand what the adult roles are in relationships. And father, parent, child, therapist, client is not a relationship that makes for good long-term relationships or marriages. And for the record, I get tired of hearing people say relationships are hard. Personally, I think that's about 90% bullshit. Relationships are hard because you're not playing enough. You're not laughing enough. You're not enjoying each other enough. If you're having a hard time in your relationship, then let's look at when are we taking time to play? When are we my partner Barb thinks she's funny, but I laugh at her jokes anyway. She even laughs at my jokes, but we have fun and we rib each other about stuff. It's funny to be in a good long-term relationship where we both respect each other and support each other. That's like the pinnacle of what I think most of us are looking for. Somebody who does that for us. And I wish everybody had that. And that's partly why I give talks like this. I want people to learn. I want people to learn to deconstruct their sexuality so they can be more successful in creating relationships and hopefully have a happy life. So to wind us all up, masturbate joyfully, connect deeply, and never let Jesus guilt you out of a good orgasm.
I love it.
If you
Unless
wanna,
it's sexy CrossFit Jesus that we talked about
well,
a few
there you
weeks
go.
ago.
You know what? What blew my mind the first time I went to a BDSM conference? There were hundreds of people. It was in St. Louis at this hotel. Hundreds of people there. I was shocked at how many people walking around with crosses, necklaces with crosses or other religious symbols. I guess Jesus was into BDSM. I mean, I guess he
I mean,
was.
seems like he might have
He,
been.
he got beaten up, I guess, with a flogger.
Yeah.
If you want to read further, obviously, I recommend my own book. I think it deals with a lot of the shit that we've talked about here today. But I think, and I am not recommending everybody become poly. I've been poly for 25 years. They're almost 30. Anyway, it's irrelevant. What I'm encouraging you to do is read a poly book because it asks questions and poses ethical issues and dilemmas that monogamous people could benefit from understanding. I think ethical non-monogamy is an incredible philosophy that we should all learn and stay as monogamous as you want. I don't really give a shit. But I find most monogamous people never ask the questions that help them stay connected to each other. And they just assume, oh, it was all wonderful when we got married. What happened 10 years later? Well, our biology happened. And we lose interest because we lose hormones. We've got to find ways to stimulate and keep those hormones flowing, or we will lose interest in each other. And the NRE, new relationship energy I talked about earlier, is something that we all love, we all enjoy, but you're not going to get it for life. So what can you do to substitute? What can you do to stimulate? What can you do to keep in touch with each other and have a wonderful long-term relationship? And that's it. Thank you, Kara.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ray. That was every bit as good as we had hoped. Okay, Martin, you have been helping me keep track of all of the questions that have been coming in, and we have had a very lively chat during this talk, as we knew we probably would. Would you like to pick out the first question to pose to Dr. Ray?
Absolutely. So let's see. There was an interesting one here. I'm going to start with this one. Do you know of any religions or philosophies that encourage masturbation?
Yes, the Unitarian Church, along with the Liberal Church of Christ, created sex education program called Our Whole Lives, OWL. And they created it back about 1998, I think, and they've been teaching it. It's age appropriate. And one component of it is sex positivity around masturbation. I think it is the best sex education on the planet. I'm not saying it couldn't be better and that I would do it the same they did if I was making it, but it's it's unique. I don't know any other churches, religious institutions that are that positive. There's other religions that are more positive, if you could call it that. But nothing that I know of is more than the Unitarian. And when I say Church of Christ, I mean the liberal Church of Christ. There's 2 or 3 different Church of Christ that aren't very, that are pretty sex negative.
Okay. So next question. This one has kind of a lot packed into it here. The question is, when it comes to being attracted to people, I have a problem admitting even to myself that I'm attracted to anyone. I have seen posts that bash something called the male gaze, and it seems that if usually men are leering or catcalling or things like that, they get told that's being disrespectful. So, is there a boundary or a line to not cross when it comes to being attracted to people? For example, if I picture a celebrity or anyone while I masturbate, is that not disrespecting them? And if not, why not?
If it's happening in your head, it's not disrespecting anybody. It's in your head. You have a right to. It's a what religions like to do, and some politicians is they like to create thought police. They want to police what you can and can't think. I don't care how many porn stars you masturbate to, or celebrities, movie stars. That's all your business because it's inside your head. And no, it's not disrespectful. What's disrespectful is when you act upon it in a way that's non-consensual or violates a boundary. That's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I don't walk down the street and see no, let's put it this way. I walk down the street and I see an attractive woman. I make a note of it. Wow, she's really good looking. I don't go up to her and tell her that. I don't do anything to indicate my attraction. I'm attracted to lots of people. You're probably attracted to lots of people. That's just normal. That's the way our brains work. We would not be sitting here talking today. Our species would not be alive today if it wasn't for attraction. Nobody, very few people get married because they're intellectually compatible. They get married because they want to fuck each other. That's what they do, and that's the way our species works.
All right.
Did I answer
enough.
all that question, you think? Or was there a piece I missed?
I think you did. Well, yeah, you made the distinction between what you're thinking versus what you're doing, which I think really does address it. There was that other piece of it, though, too, which was, having a problem admitting to even yourself that you're attracted to anyone, and feeling maybe I'm getting the sense that maybe there's some kind of guilt being associated with that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like when people kind of automatically feel bad for even feeling attraction?
Yeah, that sounds like religious, an opportunity for religious deconstruction. There's probably some guilt or shame underlying that. I don't know. I don't know the person that asked the question. I'm not into diagnosing people without without a lot more information. So I would just say take a look at your own background and your what shame or guilt you were taught, and how's that playing into your attractions or ability to admit your attractions or act upon your attractions.
All right. What's up next, Martin?
So I've got kind of this one has a little bit of a backstory with it before we get into it, but I think this one is really important for the community at large. So I'm gonna give this one. I
Okay.
was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and left the religion when I was 25 years old. I never felt sexual desire growing up, and porn has never stimulated me. It wasn't until I was 35 years old that I experienced desire for the first time when I met a woman who unexpectedly aroused me. She was my first and so far only crush. Since then, I have wanted to feel that kind of attraction again. but I don't feel attracted to most women. I've never masturbated. I recently hired a sex worker, but even with her help, I wasn't able to become aroused. Could this be a kind of delayed or highly selective sexual response connected to how I was raised? And is it common for people raised in high control religious backgrounds to struggle with attraction or arousal like this, even after leaving the cult?
Well, I can say the quick answer is yes. We see it on the chat line all the time, and I've seen it in my own interaction with people around their sexual difficulties in life. The more most cults are incredibly controlling of people's sexuality, and they teach some really horrendous ideas about your body. So it would not surprise me, and Jehovah's Witnesses clearly is one of those cults. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody comes out of Jehovah's Witnesses with real inability to uh, to relate or to be attracted or to express attractions. That's not surprising at all. It's tragic, and I'm sorry to hear this. Very sorry to hear this, um, because you're, as a human being, you're missing out on an important component of life. Now that said, you also might be asexual, or you might be a person who has a really low sex drive, or you might be a person who, whether it was Jehovah's Witnesses or not, you would only have a very narrow range of attraction to only certain people or certain types of people. And sometimes attraction is surprising. I mean, I've had experiences just in my own personal life where a person initially wasn't attractive to me, and then something clicked, and whoa, it was highly attractive. And I can't put my finger on it and say what clicked there. It may have been a pheromone, some kind of chemical that that person gave off. We are, after all, animals, and we respond to the physical expressions that our bodies put off. It could be sweat. There's interesting research around women's sexual attractiveness, attraction based upon the time of month that they are within their menstrual cycle, and smelling of sweat from t-shirts that men wore. I mean, we have clear evidence that women respond to smells that are probably pheromones that create attraction. It's just the way animals work. Your dog does it. Why wouldn't humans do it? The thing that bugs me is we don't recognize we're animals, and you were born with a certain brain, and then that brain was trained by your cult, the Jehovah's Witnesses. What your brain would have been like without the Jehovah's Witnesses, I cannot say. I can say the Jehovah's Witness probably screwed some part of your sexual responsiveness up. I wouldn't have a clue how much or how little, but it would be something to explore with a therapist. I think kudos to you reaching out and exploring your sexuality with a sex worker that taught you something, hopefully, or gave you some ideas. So I don't know. Don't have any. I can't answer some questions because I don't know the person, but that's my broad brush stroke to your question, hopefully.
All right. Well, with that, we are about at time. We've got one more question that maybe we can end on. The question was, how can we become more sex positive and rid myself of old religious programming on sex?
Well, you might read some books, some material. You might get a therapist and sit down with a good sex positive. There's an association called ASECT, AASECT. That's the Association of Sex Educators and Therapists. If you look for a therapist, look for a therapist that might be certified by ASECT. Not all therapists are, and I don't think a therapist has to be a good therapist. But you get challenged during a therapy session to look at yourself, to ask some questions you've never asked before, and I think that would be a good avenue. I would not underestimate the wonderful effects that some therapies can have. Another thing I've already suggested is go to a place where sex positivity is openly expressed. If you're a male, that can be hard because most of those organizations only let attached males in. They don't let males that are single in. Anyway, I'll stop there. I don't have any more suggestions than that, but there's some great books out there. This is an area that people have been writing about and talking about for 20 years or so. And I don't know how much you've explored or how much the person asking the question, how much you've explored this or asked the questions or gone out to experience it. But all those things, they're out there. You can find books on it. You can find people. You can hire sex workers like you said you already have done. There's people that can help you. There's even sex workers who specialize in therapy, in therapeutic approaches. I know Dr. Susie, her name's Dr. Susie out in Los Angeles. She runs a whole therapy shop there, the long distance therapy on the phone, and all of her therapists are at master's level or higher, and they're super sex positive. And anyway, I don't know much about her practice, but I do know she's got a pretty thriving practice counseling people in sex issues all over the world, not just in Los Angeles.
Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Ray, for sharing with us on this topic that is very important and that has generated a large amount of discussion. Cannot wait to hear more from you in the Hangout. And ordinarily, you give us the kind of closing thoughts, but since you gave us the talk, what I'm going to say we do is we let you give us more closing thoughts when we go to the Hangout in the form of answering people's questions. What do you say to that?
That works fine with me.
Okay. Well, then with that, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again for being here with us. And thank you everyone who came to help us make the show happen and to participate in the show and listen. And then with that, don't forget to follow us on the social medias if you are comfortable doing that. Of course, if you are not, because it might out you to other people in your social network, that's perfectly fine. But if you are comfortable doing that, like, subscribe, share, do all those things. It helps other people find us and find our services and access them. So find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and of course, YouTube, where you can find previous episodes of RfRx. And one last thing before we go to the Hangout, Martin, how else can people get involved?
Well, you can be a volunteer, and as a volunteer, I am going to highly encourage anyone who has the opportunity and the time to be able to do it. It's a pretty fantastic thing. I'm really proud of what I've been able to do here at Recovering from Religion. So, we have learned that healing can also come from helping others. RFR volunteers find meaning and purpose by volunteering with us. All of those services are supported by our staff of volunteers. We are always in need of volunteers, and there are all sorts of jobs besides working with helplines. Finding, vetting, and posting good resources for our clients to use, hosting support groups, supporting the OC, IT support, and even what we're doing right here now. To apply as a volunteer, fill out the form on our main page. If you go to recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer, you can find out more information and you can find out how to get your name signed up on there. And again, I do this myself and it's really wonderful and it's one of the best things I've ever done. So I encourage you if you have the opportunity.
Absolutely, I can concur. So please join us. And with that, there is one final link you can feel free to share with other people. If you think of anybody that might benefit from our resources, we have a real short video called RFR, What We Do, that explains in about 3 minutes what it took us like 20 minutes at the beginning of the show to describe. So feel free to share that widely. And with that, this is the part where ordinarily we invite Darrel or Gail to close us out with some final words. But what we're going to do instead is invite Darrel to stay for the Hangout and answer more questions because we have lots of questions.